My name is Jessica Chen, and I'm 29 years old. What happened at my sister's wedding reception still gets talked about at every family gathering in San Francisco. Picture this: 150 guests watching in stunned silence as I handed my sister Emily a plain white envelope during her maid of honor speech. Her face went from glowing bride to sheet white in seconds. Her new husband David actually stumbled backward. But here's what nobody expected. When Emily opened that envelope and read what was inside, she burst into tears and hugged me so tight I thought she might break my ribs. The gift that was supposed to ruin her perfect day? A $100,000 check and 3 pages of documents that would save her marriage before it even got started. But let me back up, because this story isn't really about money. It's about sisters, secrets, and sometimes having to destroy something beautiful to build something real. Before we dive into this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy stories about family loyalty and tough love. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below and let me know if you've ever had to be the bad guy to help someone you love. Let me take you back to 6 months before the wedding, when I first discovered the truth that would change everything. I was working late at my forensic accounting firm in downtown San Francisco. It was past 10 p.m., and I was finishing up a fraud investigation for a tech startup when my phone buzzed. Emily's name flashed on the screen with a photo from her engagement party, all smiles and sparkling ring. "Jess, thank God you're still awake." Her voice was shaky, almost frantic. "I need your help with something." "What's wrong? You sound upset." "It's David. I found some things." "Financial things?" "I don't understand them, but they don't look good. Can you come over? Please?" Emily lived in a gorgeous Victorian in Pacific Heights that she'd bought with her savings from 5 years as a pediatric nurse. David had moved in 6 months ago, right after their engagement. When I arrived, she was sitting at her kitchen table surrounded by papers, her laptop open, mascara smudged under her eyes. "I wasn't snooping," she said immediately. "David asked me to print out our joint tax forms for the wedding vendor, and I accidentally clicked on the wrong folder." She turned her laptop screen toward me. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, all with David's name on them. My stomach dropped as I scanned the numbers. "Emily, has David ever mentioned being in debt?" "No, never. He always talks about how good he is with money. He's the one who suggested we get a joint account after the wedding." She pointed to one of the credit card statements. "Jess, I don't even understand what half of this stuff is." I understood it perfectly. And it was worse than I'd initially thought. David Chen, no relation despite the shared last name, was drowning. 3 credit cards maxed out at over $45,000 total, a personal loan for $30,000 that he'd defaulted on twice, student loans that hadn't been paid in 8 months. But the worst part was the pattern I recognized from my forensic work: the cash advances, the balance transfers, the small charges at casinos scattered throughout Las Vegas and Atlantic City. "Emily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has David ever asked you for money?" "Not directly, but he's mentioned how tight things are for him right now. He said he's between jobs. That's why he moved in with me. And he did ask if I could cover the honeymoon since he's having cash flow issues." Cash flow issues. That's what they all called it. "How much is the honeymoon?" "12,000. But Jess, he promised to pay me back after we're married and he gets this new job he's interviewing for." I spent the next 3 hours going through David's financial history with Emily. By the end, the picture was crystal clear. David wasn't just broke. He was a gambling addict who'd been hiding his addiction and mounting debts from the woman he was about to marry. "What do I do?" Emily asked, her voice small and defeated. "The wedding is in 6 months. Everyone's invited. Mom and Dad already paid for half the catering." "You confront him. You demand complete honesty and financial transparency. You make debt counseling and gambling addiction treatment a condition of the marriage. But what if he gets angry? What if he leaves? Then he was never the right person anyway. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. By Friday, Emily called me crying. I talked to David like you said. He denied everything at first, then got furious that I'd been spying on him. He said if I really loved him, I'd trust him to handle his own finances. Then Jess, he actually asked me to take out a loan against my house to help him consolidate his debts. He said it would be a fresh start for both of us. Please tell me you said no. I said I needed time to think. But Jess, he's been so sweet since then. He brought me flowers, made me dinner, keeps talking about our future together. Maybe I'm overreacting. This is how financial abuse starts. I'd seen it dozens of times in my forensic work. The charm offensive after getting caught. The manipulation disguised as romance. The gradual erosion of boundaries until the victim feels responsible for the abuser's problems. Emily, I'm going to say something you don't want to hear. David isn't sweet. He's scared. He's scared you'll leave him before he can access your money and credit. Everything he's doing right now is designed to keep you from thinking clearly about what you discovered. You don't know him like I do. I know his financial pattern, and honey, it's not going to change just because you marry him. We argued for another hour. Emily was convinced that love would somehow fix David's problems, that marriage would give him the stability he needed to get back on track, that I was being cynical and judgmental. I wasn't being cynical. I was being realistic. But Emily wasn't ready to hear that yet. Over the next 4 months, I watched David's manipulation campaign unfold like a textbook case study. He convinced Emily to add his name to her checking account for convenience. He suggested they apply for a joint credit card to build credit together. He had her co-sign for a new car loan because his credit wasn't quite good enough on its own. Each request came with a logical explanation and a romantic gesture. The checking account suggestion came with dinner at their favorite restaurant and talk about building their future together. The credit card proposal happened during a weekend getaway he'd planned as a surprise. The car loan came with a sob story about how unreliable his old car was and how he needed dependable transportation to be a good husband. Emily, who had never been in a serious relationship before David, interpreted all of this as love and commitment. She couldn't see the web being spun around her finances, but I could. And I started building my case. You see, forensic accounting isn't just about finding where money went missing. It's about building a complete picture of financial behavior, predicting future patterns, and sometimes, when you're lucky, preventing disasters before they happen. I used my professional resources to dig deeper into David's background. What I found made my blood run cold. David hadn't just hidden his debts from Emily. He'd hidden his entire financial history. This wasn't his first time drowning in gambling-related debt. 3 years ago, he'd filed for bankruptcy in Nevada. 2 years before that, he'd defaulted on a mortgage in Arizona. There was a trail of unpaid debts, broken lease agreements, and financial chaos, stretching back nearly a decade. But the most disturbing discovery came from a private investigator I sometimes worked with on fraud cases. David had been engaged once before, to a woman named Sarah Mitchell in Denver. That engagement had ended when Sarah discovered David had been using her Social Security number to open credit accounts in her name. Sarah had been forced to hire a lawyer and spend thousands of dollars clearing her credit. The police report was filed, but David had disappeared before any charges could be pursued. I had 2 choices: tell Emily everything and risk destroying our relationship when she refused to believe me, or find another way to protect her. I chose protection. I spent $15,000 of my own money hiring the best private investigator in California to document David's current activities. What we found was exactly what I'd feared. David was still gambling, still accumulating debt, And now he was using Emily's address and financial information to apply for loans and credit cards. The man she was planning to marry in 2 months was actively committing financial fraud against her. But Emily was so deep in the romance fog that she wouldn't hear a word against David. Every conversation we had about him ended in an argument. She accused me of being jealous of her happiness, of trying to sabotage her relationship because I was still single. "You've never been in love," she told me during one particularly heated phone call. "You don't understand what it's like to want to build a life with someone. I understand financial fraud, and that's what's happening to you. Stop calling it fraud. He's my fiancé. We're going to be married. Everything that's mine will be his anyway." That sentence haunted me for weeks. Everything that's mine will be his anyway. Emily had worked so hard for what she had. 5 years of nursing school, working double shifts, saving every penny to buy her house, building a solid financial foundation, and she was about to hand it all over to a man who saw her as nothing more than a solution to his money problems. I made a decision that would either save my sister or destroy our relationship forever. 2 weeks before the wedding, I liquidated some investments and withdrew $100,000 from my business account. Then I called my lawyer. "I need to create a very specific type of financial protection plan," I told him, "for someone who's about to make a catastrophic mistake." What we created was elegant in its simplicity. A trust fund with very specific conditions. Money that could only be accessed for certain purposes, with certain safeguards, and only with proper legal oversight. It was designed to protect Emily's interests while forcing complete financial transparency from her husband. But I knew Emily would never agree to it voluntarily, not while she was under David's influence. So I decided to present it as a wedding gift, at the reception, in front of everyone who mattered to her. It was a calculated risk. Emily might hate me forever, but at least she'd be financially protected. The wedding day arrived with that perfect October weather San Francisco sometimes delivers. Clear skies, warm sun, just enough breeze to keep things comfortable. The ceremony was at the Presidio Officers Club, with views of the Golden Gate Bridge and the bay. Emily looked absolutely stunning in her grandmother's vintage lace dress, which she'd had altered to fit perfectly. I stood next to her as her maid of honor, watching David promise to love, honor, and cherish her, knowing exactly what those promises were worth based on his financial history. He'd continued gambling right up until the week before the wedding. The private investigator had photos of him at a casino in Reno just 5 days earlier. During the ceremony, I caught David's eye once. He smiled at me, that charming smile that had fooled Emily so completely. But I saw something else in his expression, a smugness, like he'd won some kind of game. He had no idea what was coming. The reception was magical, exactly what Emily had dreamed of. String quartet during dinner, personalized. Cocktails named after the couple, centerpieces made from flowers Emily had grown in her own garden. Our parents were beaming. Emily's nursing school friends were crying happy tears. Even I was caught up in the beauty of it all, until it was time for the maid of honor speech. I'd prepared 2 versions. The safe one, full of childhood memories and wishes for happiness, and the real one, the one I was actually going to give. I stood up, champagne glass in hand, and looked out at the 150 guests who'd come to celebrate Emily and David's new beginning. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Jessica, Emily's sister and maid of honor." Polite applause, warm smiles. Emily beamed at me from the head table. "Emily and I have been through everything together. We've shared secrets, dreams, arguments, and most importantly, we've always protected each other. When we were kids, if someone was picking on Emily at school, I'd step in. If I was struggling with homework, Emily would help me understand it. We've always had each other's backs." Emily's eyes were getting misty, This was going exactly like the sweet sister speech she'd expected. That's why what I'm about to do might seem harsh, but I need everyone here to understand. It comes from a place of complete love and protection. The room went quiet. Emily's smile faltered slightly. Emily, you know I've always been direct with you. Sometimes that's meant telling you things you didn't want to hear. Tonight is one of those times. I reached into my purse and pulled out the white envelope I'd prepared. This is my wedding gift to you and David. But it's not what either of you are expecting. I walked over to the head table and placed the envelope in front of Emily. Her hands were shaking as she picked it up. Inside that envelope is a check for $100,000. It's also a legally binding document that establishes a protection trust in your name, Emily. The money can only be used for specific purposes: your mortgage, your education, emergency medical expenses, or approved investments in your future. The room was dead silent. David's face had gone pale. The trust requires complete financial transparency from your spouse. All debts, all income, all financial obligations must be disclosed and verified before any funds can be accessed. It also includes protection against financial fraud or abuse. Emily opened the envelope with trembling fingers. I watched her face as she read the first page, the check amount, then the legal language explaining the trust conditions. David, I said, turning to face him directly. This trust also includes a provision for financial counseling and debt resolution. The funds can be used to help you address your current debt situation, but only through a licensed financial counselor who will create a transparent repayment plan. David was standing now, his face red with anger. What the hell is this supposed to mean? It means I know about the $75,000 in debt you've hidden from Emily. I know about the gambling. I know about Sarah Mitchell in Denver and what you did to her credit. I know about the bankruptcy in Nevada and the foreclosure in Arizona. Gasps echoed through the reception hall. Emily's face went from confusion to shock to something that looked like horror. You're lying, David said, but his voice cracked. I'm a forensic accountant, David. I'm very good at following money trails. And your trail leads through a decade of financial fraud, gambling addiction, and exploiting women who trusted you. Emily was staring at the documents in her hands, reading the detailed financial report I'd included. Every debt, every missed payment, every lie David had told her was laid out in black and white. This is our wedding day, David shouted. How dare you do this here in front of everyone? I did it here because it's the only place you couldn't run away or convince Emily to ignore the evidence. I did it here because Emily deserves to know the truth before she legally binds herself to your financial disasters. Emily stood up slowly, the papers still in her hands. Tears were streaming down her face, but she wasn't making a sound. David, she said quietly, is this true? Emily, I can explain. Is it true? Her voice was stronger now. David looked around the room, at all the faces staring at him, at the undeniable evidence in Emily's hands, at the sister who'd just blown up his carefully constructed facade. Some of it, he admitted. But Emily, I was going to tell you. After we were married, when things settled down, I was going to come clean about everything. You were going to tell me after you had legal access to my house, my savings, my credit. Emily's voice was getting louder. After I couldn't protect myself anymore. It's not like that. I love you. Love doesn't lie about $75,000 in debt. Love doesn't hide gambling addiction. Love doesn't use someone's social security number to open credit accounts without their permission. She turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, a mixture of gratitude and determination. Jessica, this trust fund you created, does it protect me from debts I didn't agree to take on? Completely. It also establishes legal separation of your assets from any spouse who refuses to meet the transparency requirements. Emily nodded slowly, then looked back at David. I want you to get help. Real help. Financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment. If you do that, if you're completely honest with me about everything, then we can talk about rebuilding trust and maybe making this marriage work. And if I don't? Then this marriage is annulled before it really begins. The reception hall was completely silent. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen in place as they watched this family drama unfold. David looked around the room one more time, then back at Emily. You know what? Forget this. I don't need to put up with this humiliation. I don't need your sister's money or her conditions. I don't need any of this. He started to walk away, then turned back. Emily, if you choose her over me, you'll regret it. I was the best thing that ever happened to you. Emily straightened her shoulders and looked him directly in the eye. No, David. The best thing that ever happened to me was having a sister who loved me enough to risk everything to protect me. David stormed out of the reception hall. Half the guests were whispering, the other half were staring at Emily and me in stunned silence. Emily walked over to where I was standing and wrapped her arms around me. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have listened to you months ago. I'm sorry I had to do it this way. I'm sorry I ruined your wedding. She pulled back and looked at me, tears still streaming but with a small smile on her face. You didn't ruin my wedding, Jess. You saved my life. The aftermath was complicated, as these things always are. Emily had the marriage annulled within a week. The legal process was straightforward since the marriage had been based on fraud and material misrepresentation. David had already disappeared, leaving no forwarding address. The trust fund I'd created remained in place, and Emily used part of it to hire a financial advisor to help her understand and protect her assets going forward. She also used some of the money to take a forensic accounting course herself, because she never wanted to be vulnerable to financial manipulation again. 6 months later, Emily met James Rodriguez, a fellow nurse who worked in the children's cancer ward at UCSF. Their first date was coffee, and a conversation about their respective student loan repayment plans. James appreciated Emily's new approach to financial transparency. They've been together for 2 years now. James knew the whole story from day one, about David, about the wedding disaster, about the trust fund. His response was to suggest they take a financial planning class together before they got serious about their future. Emily still gets emotional when she talks about that wedding day. Not because of the public humiliation or the drama, but because she realized how close she'd come to losing everything she'd worked for. I was so caught up in the idea of being in love that I stopped thinking clearly, she told me recently. I was ready to hand over my house, my credit, my entire financial future to someone who saw me as a mark, not a partner. David, it turned out, had moved on to his next target within 2 months. The private investigator kept tabs on him for a while and discovered he'd gotten engaged to a real estate agent in Portland. When I sent that woman the same financial report I'd given Emily, she called off the engagement immediately. The $100,000 trust fund became the foundation for Emily's future financial security. She's used it to pay off her mortgage early, to fund additional nursing, certifications that increased her salary, and to start an emergency fund that could support her for 6 months if needed. But more importantly, it gave her confidence. The knowledge that she had resources and protection allowed her to make relationship choices based on love and compatibility, not financial dependence or desperation. The wedding guests? Most of them thanked me later. Quietly, privately, but they thanked me. They'd all seen something that didn't feel right about David, but no one had known how to address it. My dramatic revelation gave them permission to acknowledge their concerns. Emily's nursing friends started asking me for financial advice for their own relationships. I ended up creating a workshop series called Financial Red Flags in Relationships that I still present at women's groups around the Bay Area. My parents took longer to understand what I'd done and why I'd done it that way. They were embarrassed by the public nature of the confrontation, worried about what their friends would think. But 6 months later, when Emily was thriving in her relationship with James, when she was financially secure and emotionally healthy, they finally got it. "You saved your sister," Dad told me. "I don't know if I would have had the courage to do what you did, but I'm grateful you did." Here's what I learned from that experience. Sometimes love means being the villain in someone else's story, at least temporarily. Sometimes protecting the people you care about requires you to risk their anger, their rejection, even their hatred. I knew there was a chance Emily would never forgive me for humiliating her at her own wedding. I knew our relationship might never recover, but I also knew that if I stayed silent, I'd be watching her lose her house, her credit, her savings, and her emotional well-being to a man who'd done the same thing to other women. The risk was worth it. I also learned that financial abuse is often invisible, even to smart, educated, successful people. Emily wasn't naive or stupid. She was a critical care nurse who made life and death decisions every day. But she'd never encountered someone who used romance as a weapon to access financial resources. The warning signs were all there: the rushing into financial commitments, the requests for money disguised as relationship milestones, the isolation from family members who asked too many questions. But Emily interpreted all of that as love and commitment, because that's how David presented it. If you're in a relationship where someone is pushing you to make financial decisions quickly, where they're asking you to keep financial arrangements secret from family or friends, where they're creating situations that make you financially dependent on them, those are red flags. Trust your instincts and ask someone you trust to take an objective look at the situation. For anyone watching this who has concerns about a loved one's relationship but doesn't know how to address it, start with questions, not accusations. Have you talked about how you'll handle finances after marriage? Are you comfortable with the level of debt you'll be taking on together? Does their financial situation match what they've told you about their job and income? Sometimes people need permission to acknowledge their own doubts. And for anyone who thinks I was too harsh, too dramatic, too willing to destroy a wedding for the sake of money, I wasn't fighting about money. I was fighting for my sister's autonomy, her security, her right to make informed decisions about her own life. Money was just the weapon David was using to take those things away from her. The trust fund still exists, by the way. Emily and James used part of it as a down payment on a house they bought together, after both of their names went through complete financial background checks, after they'd taken that financial planning class, after they'd established a prenuptial agreement that protected both of their assets. Emily insisted on the prenup. "I never want to be in a position where I'm making decisions based on fear of financial loss," she explained to James. "I want to choose you every day because I love you, not because I can't afford to leave you." James understood completely. His response was to suggest they both take additional courses in financial literacy and investment planning. Their idea of a romantic evening now includes reviewing their budget and discussing their retirement savings goals. That might sound unromantic to some people. To Emily, it's the most romantic thing in the world, a partner who wants to build something together, instead of taking what she's already built. The wedding that never quite finished became a story our family tells at every gathering, not as a cautionary tale, but as a celebration of the kind of love that shows up when it matters most. Remember Jessica's speech at Emily's wedding? Someone always says. And then the story gets retold with new details, new perspectives, new appreciation for the courage it took to risk everything for the chance to save someone you love. Emily always ends the story the same way. "My sister gave me the best wedding gift anyone's ever received. She gave me my future back." That's worth more than any amount of money, more than any piece of jewelry, more than any traditional wedding gift. She gave me the chance to choose my own life instead of having it chosen for me by someone else's debt and deception. If you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you love, you know it's never easy. You know there's always a chance it could backfire. Always a risk that they'll choose the person who's hurting them over the person who's trying to help them. But sometimes, if you're lucky, if you time it right, if you have enough evidence and enough courage, sometimes you can give someone the information they need to save themselves. That's what happened in that reception hall 2 years ago. I didn't save Emily's marriage. I didn't ruin Emily's marriage. I gave Emily the tools to save herself, and she made the choice to use them. The $100,000 was just money. The real gift was information, courage, and the kind of love that's willing to be misunderstood in order to protect what matters most. If you've ever been the person who had to speak up when everyone wanted you to stay quiet, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping someone safe, type "worth it" in the comments below. If you believe that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's self-destruction, hit that like button. And if you've ever been saved by someone who was willing to risk everything to protect you, share this story. Because the world needs more people who are willing to be temporarily hated in order to provide permanent protection. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, real love doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller, poorer, or more vulnerable. Real love builds you up and helps you build yourself up. Your financial security matters. Your emotional security matters. Your right to make informed decisions about your own life matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, no matter how much they claim to love you. Your future is worth protecting, even if it costs you everything else. What do you think? Was Jessica right to confront David publicly, or should she have found another way? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone from their own relationship? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you would have done in Jessica's situation. Subscribe for more stories about family loyalty, tough choices, and the complicated ways we show love for each other. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story about people who refuse to stay silent when silence would be easier. Remember, your boundaries matter, your instincts matter, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to watch someone destroy themselves.